Hey, what's up my dudes? Devayon here, bringing another Baldur's Gate guide video. In this video, we're going to be talking about high level abilities. We're going to talk about every single one for every single class and kit in the game, what they do, what they're good for, and whether or not you should be taking them in your Baldur's Gate run. So just a couple quick caveats before we get started. We do play hardcore, no save, no reload, so if the main character dies, it's game over. We're back to Baldur's Gate 1. We're playing on insane difficulty, so every person in the party is taking double damage. And finally, we have all components of SCS installed to make the game more challenging. SCS is Sword Coast Stratagems. It has a variety of components, such as giving all enemies that are eligible to receive high-level abilities, will have them. Mages and clerics will insta-cast spells at the start of the fight in order to make things more challenging and more fair. And pretty much every high-level monster in the game, such as dragons, liches, mind flayers, etc., will be given a variety of nasty tools and toys to play with in order to make the game much more challenging for us. So everything I'm saying is going to be in regards to that particular set of rules that we have here. However, 99% of what I'm saying will apply to your unmodded, regular difficulty Baldur's Gate runs as well. And I'll do my best to highlight those differences because there are a couple spells and abilities that have changed with SCS. So let's go ahead and get started here, boys. So in order to do this video and make this video, we actually had to do a couple things. Instead of normally doing what we would originally do is say that this spell is S tier and you should always take it. That's not always going to be the case, because with high level abilities, you're eligible to take some of them on a multi-class. So for example, Hardiness is going to be really awesome for a regular fighter. It might not be as awesome, for example, a fighter mage. So I'm going to try to do my best to highlight those differences between them as we come across them. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started here. So the first class we're going to be going over right now is going to be the Shaman. The Shaman's going to have access to Druid HLAs with some exceptions, and it will also receive some special HLAs that are available only to the Shaman class. Alright, so the first HLA here we have here is Energy Blades. Energy Blades is going to be eligible for all clerics, druids, and shamans. It lasts for 4 turns with a quick cast time of 3, and this is basically the beefier version of Melf's Minute Meteors. It's going to give you a massive bonus to your THAC0 of plus 10. It will do 1d4 plus 5 missile damage and additional 1d10 electrical damage on every strike. In addition, your attacks per round are modified to 9 as long as the disc are held. You get 1 disc per level of the caster. So obviously this isn't going to scale as well for druids, but it's going to scale decently well for a shaman and a cleric, especially if you're a pure single class. Obviously, the shaman is going to be a single class, but the cleric might not be. Now, this will, if you're given improved taste, you're not going to jump up to 18 attacks per round. You're just going to be put at the max of 10. So this is okay. It's not really an amazing spell. I personally am not a big fan of it. I almost never use it unless I have absolutely nothing left and I am playing with the mod that separates HLAs into a one use every single day. Kind of thing, as opposed to taking up a level 7th spell slot. If you're playing without that mod, if this is taking up a level 7th spell slot, I really wouldn't recommend ever taking Energy Blades. There are way better spells that you could be taking in its place. It's just not good enough to earn that slot. If you are playing with a mod that separates this out into its own unique ability, it's not bad. It's not bad. It's going to make your spellcaster do a little bit extra physical damage to back up your front line. In that case, it's okay, but otherwise I would never take this. I have this written down at a B tier, but honestly, it really does depend on your party setup and what classes you are running, whether you're a multi-class, etc., etc. If, for example, you're a cleric ranger, you probably wouldn't want to use this because you're going to be meleeing instead. If, however, you're a pure cleric and your job is really just to heal the front line, Energy Blades might not be a bad pickup for you in order to do some extra physical damage. However, when it comes to pure spell casting, you're going to be taking something like Implosion or Mass Raised Dead a little later on, which we'll talk about in a few. So, I'm going to leave it as a B tier spell. Up next is Storm of Vengeance. Storm of Vengeance is going to be an AoE spell, very similar to Cloud Kill. Has a short duration of 3 rounds, a fairly long cast time of 8, and it says it has an 15-foot radius, although it does feel a little bit bigger to me. What this spell will do is anyone who's caught inside, enemies only, so it is party friendly, will take 1d6 electrical, 1d6 fire, and 1d6 acid, and they can save her spell to only take half damage. They also have a chance to be poisoned. In the first round, a saver's death negates. There is no penalty to saving here. This spell is just incredibly underwhelming. If it had a chance to knock them down because of the earthquake, or stun them, or silence them, or do something else, this spell might be decent. But the fact that all it does is damage, I mean, what's the point of using this over a Cloud Kill? Because the only idea I could really have to make this spell useful was to interrupt spellcasters, in which case, okay, interrupting spellcasters is good, but why not drop a Cloud Kill, for example? I guess Cloud Kill doesn't work on Liches, so you could make the argument that this spell would work on Liches, but at the same time, Liches often cast protection spells to make them immune to this shit. Protection from the elements is a very common spell, and if you're casting protection from fire, cold, and lightning, which almost every Lich does anyways, and I mean, it feels so incredibly underwhelming. If you're going to try to cast this on some enemy fighters, this is going to do absolutely nothing. And if you're trying to cast this on regular spellcasters, then a Cloud Kill is going to work just as fine. And a Cloud Kill is a level 5 mage spell, as opposed to a high-level ability. So this spell is just really underwhelming to me. Like I said, I guess you could make the argument that it will work on Liches, but even then it shouldn't be working on Demi-Liches unless, well, it depends on what mods you have installed. So I leave it as a B tier spell. It's okay. If you have this separate, like I said, if it's not taking up a level 7 spell slot, then this spell could be fairly decent as you just throw out some extra raw damage to interrupt spellcasters. But other than that, again, if you're not using mods at all, you're playing unmodded, I would never ever take this spell, ever, to take up a level 7 spell slot. So I'm going to still leave it as a B tier. Up next, we have Elemental Summoning. Elemental Summoning is also a B tier spell. And this, in my opinion, is regardless of whether you're using it as a level 7 spell slot or if it's its own separate unique ability. Has a duration of 1 turn, very long cast time of 9, and it will summon 2 16 hit dice elementals randomly chosen of Earth, Air, or Fire. They will remain for 1 turn and obey the spellcaster as long as summoned, with a 10% chance of summoning one of the elemental princes. So this spell, again, they're fairly beefy, 16 HD, even in TOB will actually drop fairly quickly, but they're going to be way beefier than pretty much anything else you can summon up, aside from, like, say, the fire elemental summoning that druids get as is. But the chance to get the elemental prince, this actually says 10%, but I see this happen way, way more often than 10%. And the elemental princes are actually really, really beefy. They're actually a lot better than they used to be. SCS does tweak them a little bit to make them a bit stronger. It also depends on if you're using A tweaks as well. There's a couple mods out there that will make these summons quite strong. But with SCS, I find these to be fairly decent. Their THAC0 is quite good, and they dispel magic on every single hit, so you can actually use them to break buffs relatively reliably when you're fighting enemy mixed spellcasters, like for example Drow. A lot of times Drow will be multi-classes, they'll cast some buffs on themselves and then charge into melee, and these things are actually really good at not only absorbing their damage but also dispelling them on top of it, because like I said, every single attack they land will dispel magic, very similar to the way Karsamir and Planetar is used. So I would say this spell is okay. Again, it's not really amazing. If it is taking up a level 7 spell slot, again, it's not terrible. If you need a summon in order to absorb some frontline damage, this spell is not bad. Again, it's not amazing. It's not as good as the Greater Elemental Summoning, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but it's not bad. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it at a B tier spell. Up next is Ethereal Retribution. This is Shaman only. I believe this can be taken multiple times. I think only Favor of the Spirits is the only one that can only be taken once. So this spell can be taken multiple times, just like the others. Again, depending on whether or not you have these separated as abilities or useful as a level 7 spell. And this is kind of like Storm of Vengeance, but better. So this will only last for 3 rounds, so just like Storm of Vengeance, very short duration, unlike Cloud Kill, Incendiary Cloud, the others, etc., etc. But the great thing about this spell is there's no save. And it only affects enemies. They take 3d8 points of magic damage for the round for the next 3 rounds, which is actually not bad. No save means whenever a wizard is trying to cast something, they're going to get interrupted. And they're not guaranteed to get interrupted, but very likely to get interrupted, which is really nice, because this will go through their spell protections. In addition, all living enemies, undead, and constructs are unaffected, must save or spell or lose 2 points of strength every round for 5 rounds. This is absolutely whatever. Chances are, enemies are not going to be filling their saves, especially when there is no penalty to saving. At this point in the game, almost every enemy is going to have single-digit saves. So this is, chances are, even with a Malison, this is it's still not going to happen a lot. And even if it did, I mean, I guess if you're using this on a demon, having him go from 25 strength to even just 20 strength is a fairly significant damage reduction, but even then it's still just really underwhelming, and it can't reduce them to strength below 1, which would automatically kill them. And if it did that, that would actually be kind of cool, to be honest. But even then, it's just every 2 points of strength every round for 5 rounds. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, if this lands, great, but I wouldn't really count on it. The only reason you're really using this spell is for the unavoidable damage right here. I do not believe this pierces magic resistance, so this won't work on, say, Planetars or Demogorgon or a handful of other enemies that do have MR. It obviously still might, because MR is not perfect. You can have 99 MR and this will still hit, but I would say this is pretty decent. I would actually bump this up to an A tier level just because it's pretty much guaranteed to interrupt a mage. And interrupting mages in TOB is super, super important. So I would say the spell is pretty good. Not amazing, definitely not S tier, but I would definitely put it above Storm of Vengeance, that's for sure. Up next is Global Blades. I absolutely hate this spell. This spell lasts for 1 turn, super long cast time of 9, and what it will do is it'll set up a barrier very similar to the lower level spell, where any enemy passing through it will take 10d10 points of damage. Now, the way this is phrased makes it seem like any enemy that gets near you has to save or take 10 points of damage, and you could just run around in a circle and just tearing every enemy to shreds. That's not actually how this works. For some strange reason, the only time I've ever actually seen this spell do damage is if I'm summoning it when an enemy is already attacking me. And in order to do that, your cleric has to walk into melee range and then start casting this spell. Now, if you have the Icewind Dale components of SCS installed, you can throw up the Divine Protection spell, making you immune to physical damage so you can safely cast this. If you don't and you're playing unmodded, this spell is absolutely worthless. Even with a -2 save penalty, I've seen this actually hit an enemy once in my life. I've seen this hit me more than I've seen it hit enemies. And when it hits you on insane difficulty, it does an enormous amount of damage, and it makes it seem like it's a really good spell. But every single time I've tried to use it, it just is incredibly underwhelming, and I would not recommend it. I have this spell as a C tier. No, I don't really care what multi-class or specialization you're using. I really don't see this being a good spell ever. If you know of some way to actually make this reliably work, if I'm just doing it wrong, let me know in the comments. But to my knowledge, this spell just absolutely sucks, and I would never ever take it. Up next is Implosion. Implosion is probably the best spell you get as a cleric along with Mass Raise Dead. It is very, very strong. It has a fairly decent cast time of 5. It has a duration of 2 rounds, and what it will do is it will do 10d10 fire damage and 10d10 blunt damage, and the victim can save for half. But the most important part of this spell is the no save hold for 1 round. Command is one of the most devastating spells in Baldur's Gate 1, and Implosion is basically a command that's usable in Throne of Baal. And that makes this spell devastating. If an enemy is unable to move for 1 round, even if it's Demogorgon, you can drop it from 100% to 0 if you have a fighter-heavy party. If everyone in your party is dual-wielding with improved haste, rocking a lot of attacks per round, which they should be, you shouldn't be using Greater Whirlwind, which we'll talk about later, you will basically chop up anything to bits in seconds. The only thing I could see not dying in a single round would be a dragon, just because they have like 1,000 plus HP depending on how many mods you're using. And even then, this is going to do an enormous amount of damage. Like I said, the damage here, that's not bad. But you're not using it for the damage. You're using it for the fucking hold right here that is going to go through. It's just so strong. It's just so strong. Having an enemy being unable to defend themselves and have every auto land on them and go through their defenses is just brutally powerful. And for that reason, Implosion is 100% S tier. However, do be careful. This can be reflected. I have hit myself with Implosion in the past and permanently killed Edwin by not paying, or not Edwin, one of my casters by not paying attention. And it's hilarious when that happens, but at the same time, it's really unfortunate when that happens too. So be careful with it, but definitely an S tier spell. Incredibly powerful, like I said, for the hold. This is really, really good. You definitely want to be taking this. Up next, Mass Raise Dead. This is possibly the other S tier spell for Divine Spellcasters. It is a Necromancy spell, not that that actually matters. Very quick cast time of 2, and this is hugely important. And this will resurrect every single person in your party, and then after a short delay, will heal them for 3d10 plus 1 HP per level of the caster. Keep in mind, there is a delay. There is a delay. It is very possible for you to use Mass Raise Dead, your party members get resurrected, and if you're doing this in the middle of combat, they're going to get hit with something and permanently killed right then and there. So you have to be very careful with this spell. However, this is really a mass cure on steroids, which is the main reason I use it. I use this not for resurrection, but just for the fact that it is an incredibly powerful heal. It is not uncommon to have your entire party at half HP or less, cast one of these spells, and have everyone healed to full. Excuse me. Very, very strong heal, and it's extremely quick as well. With a cast time of 2, this goes off just like that. It's not uncommon that I'll use this just to give a quick heal to my front line if my cleric is too far away for whatever reason. This spell is really, really, really strong. This and Implosion are the 2 spells that I would take all the time on my clerics if I was using level 7 spell slots. These are very, very, very good. Really can't say enough good things about it. Mass Raise Dead is fantastic. You should definitely be taking it. Up next is Aura of Flaming Death. This one is really weird. For a pure cleric, I find this spell to be absolutely useless. However, if you are a cleric fighter or another, if you are something that is meleeing, this spell actually becomes quite good, which I'll talk about in a minute. It has a decent duration of 1 round every 2 levels. This isn't gonna last a long time. But what it does, it gives you 90% fire resistance, which is whatever, but it gives you a massive AC bonus of 4, which you can combine with a variety of other spells and abilities in order to make your armor class actually decent. In throwing a ball, a fighter actually is the worst tank in the game. One of, I should say, because, well, aside from the monk, obviously. The monk is just absolute dog shit of a class. But the fighter will have a very low AC cap, and low not in a good way. Because the way armor scales in Baldur's Gate 2 is the best armor you can get is going to be the Drow Full Plate plus 5. At no point in the game will you ever come across armor that gives you more AC than Drow Full Plate. You're not going to be getting a necklace that gives you plus 3 AC. You're not going to be finding rings that give you plus 5 AC. You're not going to be finding shields that give you plus 10 AC. From Baldur's Gate 2 to Throne of Ball, armor class for a fighter doesn't really change much. You might get 1 bonus if you're using the Guard's Ring, which gives you plus 3 AC as opposed to plus 2. Or not the Guard's Ring, Io's Gift, excuse me. Guard's Ring is plus 2, Io's Gift is plus 3. So you might get a little bit of a boost, but not much. Which means that when you're fighting demons with 25 strength, or fire giants with 22 strength, who have grand mastery and a weapon of their choice, and then are popping HLAs on top of it, you're going to be getting hit every single time. The last time I did testing, I had Corrigan with negative 12 AC, had him go into melee with a fire giant, and the fire giant rolled a 2 and hit him. So you're going to come across enemies that are just really never missing. But you can get around that by stacking armor class using a variety of spells, and this is one of those spells that does this. We'll talk about some more like Evasion that thieves get, and a couple other abilities that are really nice, but you can combine this with, say, improved invisibility, for example, in addition to having a really good shield, in addition to all the armor stuff that a fighter would normally be wearing, and all of a sudden your fighter cleric is now sitting in negative 20-something AC as opposed to negative 10, which makes a fairly decent difference. Enemies are still going to be landing attacks more often than not, but it is possible with a combination of spells to get your AC to a point where a Planetar, for example, is not an instant death sentence just because they're in melee like they were in Baldur's Gate 2 early on. When you're level 12 in Baldur's Gate 2, fighting Lavok and he drops a Planetar on you, that is a very nasty fight. And Throne of Ball, having all these armor buffs stacked up, all of a sudden that Planetar is going to be landing autos very, very rarely, if at all. So for that reason, I would give this spell... It's really hard to rate this spell, just because, like I said, if you're a pure cleric, this spell is trash, because you don't want to be in melee ever anyways. If you're a fighter cleric, this spell is suddenly pretty good if you're combining with other spells. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it at A tier. A tier, like I said, it's honestly, it's S tier if you're combining with other stuff, and it's C tier if you're not. So maybe we'll make up a new tier right here and now. It's X tier. X tier is the new tier, boys, where it depends on your class, honestly. And I know that sounds like kind of like a shitty cop-out, but honestly, there really is a big difference between a cleric taking the spell and a fighter cleric taking the spell. So for that reason, we're going to leave it at X tier. It depends on your class. If you're meleeing, the spell is great if you combine it with other AC bonuses. If you're not, this spell sucks. It also does a decent amount of fire damage to people autoing you. I mean, big deal. 2d10 is actually a lot of damage, but that's not where you're using this spell. You're really using it for the bonus. And of course, the fire resistance isn't bad either, especially if you are really low on fire resistance equipment. For whatever reason, if someone got petrified or permanently killed wearing a fire resistance ring, you're not going to have enough fire resistance for everyone in the party, and you can kind of use this as a little bit of a boost to that character to save your fire resistance items for other people in your party. All right, up next is Spirit Form. Spirit Form, I believe I have as A tier. I have it B tier here. But this is a tough one for me. For one, I absolutely hate the Shaman. I hate the Shaman class. I think the Shaman class sucks. I think it sounds great on paper, but the Shaman dance is absolutely ridiculous. They should delete it and replace it with something else. Anyways, this spell will last for 5 rounds, super quick cast time of 1, which is great. And what it does is it basically gives you 50% damage reduction, and it gives you improved invisibility, which means you can't be directly targeted by spells. This is a lie if you're playing with SES, because enemies can see through improved invisibility just fine. Mind Flayers, Liches, Dragons, etc., they don't give a shit. They're happy to target you with spells. However, a regular low-level mage cannot. In addition, you will be getting the bonuses of improved invisibility, which means a +4 to save for all saves, -4 penalty to enemies trying to hit you, in addition to obviously the 50% damage reduction. So again, just like with Armor of Flaming Death, you can kind of combine these here to actually give yourself some fairly decent AC bonuses to make it a little bit more difficult to hit you. If you're taking the spell by itself, I would not put it at A tier. However, if you're combining this with Aura of Flaming Death or some other abilities that are giving you some bonuses to armor class, then all of a sudden this spell becomes fairly decent. So I'm actually going to go ahead and put it in A tier, just because, like I said, if you're combining this shit, this is actually pretty nice. This is going to make your Shaman fairly tanky in that regard. But again, does it really matter? Because if you're meleeing with your Shaman, you're already making a mistake as is. The Shaman is really just, honestly, a shittier Druid. At the end of the day, the Shaman class really is just a shittier Druid. I mean, guess you can try to play it as a melee if you really want, especially if you're playing on normal difficulty, you'll be fine. But if you're playing on insane difficulty, you really don't want your Shaman in melee range. However, Spirit Form is required for Favor to the Spirit, so you do want to put at least 1 point in it just so you can get this spell. Now, this spell is quite possibly the best thing Shamans get. And a hardcore, no save, no reload run, this is actually a pretty amazing spell. This lasts for 1 hour with a long cast time of 9, and what it does is it will make you immune to all death magic, and if you're reduced below 10 hit points, the Shaman is healed instantly to full HP, as if they just got hit by a heal spell. Now, what's really amazing about this spell is, unlike Cheat Death, which Thieves get, this spell actually seems to make you truly immune to everything. I have tried hitting myself with Petrification, I've tried disintegrating myself, I have tried hitting myself with enormous amounts of physical damage, implosion, etc. And for some reason, no matter how low my HP goes, I don't actually die. This spell will proc, and I'll get healed to full. So unlike some other abilities that pretend to allow you to cheat death, this actually truly allows you to cheat death. If you have this buff up, you cannot die in Baldur's Gate. Again, I'm not sure, I may have missed something along the way, but I've tested this with a variety of spells and abilities, and this seems to be the case, that if you have this spell up, you are incapable of dying. And so in a hardcore run, that's actually pretty damn good. That's actually really useful. Not being able to die, that is really good. You don't want to die. Dying is bad. If you can't die, awesome. However, you can only take this spell once, and it only lasts for an hour, so it doesn't have a long duration, but I mean, honestly, you should be resting after an hour anyways, just because you're going to be fighting so many enemies and using so many spells and abilities. Having this up at all times at the beginning of every fight is not impossible. And if you are protected from some bullshit, such as getting hit with a Dragon's Breath, or a Planetar jumping on top of you and trying to cut your head off, this could be the save that allows you to stay in the game and not have to start over from Baldur's Gate 1. And for that reason, this is definitely an S tier spell. Just because, like I said, I've tested this with a variety of abilities and spells, and it really does seem to always activate. So, awesome. Definitely a good thing. Great thing the Shaman class gets. Shaman class is still a shitty Druid, but you know what? That is a pretty damn cool spell. Alright, up next is Shadowdancer. Shadowdancer has access to Thief HLAs with the exception of, of Trap HLAs, which we'll talk about once we get to the Bard. Alright, we think we gotta go and put a couple points in Move Silently here so we can actually level up the Thief to look at the abilities. And what's actually interesting about the Shadowdancer is I think, honestly, all their HLAs are S tier. They're actually really, really good. So Shadow Twin is basically Simulacrum. For 2 turns, so for 2 minutes, you're going to get a Simulacrum of your Shadowdancer. At 60% HP, it does have the ability to hide in shadows repeatedly and go for backstabs. It does get the same backstab multiplier as a Thief, depending on how high level you are. If you're doing this right at level, whatever level you are when you get your first HLA, it will be doing it at a lower backstab multiplier, but later on the game, it will have the same backstab multiplier as you. I believe Shadowdancer caps out at ×4, if I'm correct, at level 13. So it's not too hard to get this to level to ×4 backstab pretty quickly. You're going to have that fairly early on. And it does the same physical damage you do. It can backstab. It can be used to absorb a variety of abilities and spells. So all in all, a great spell. You can take this multiple times as well. I mean, Simulacrum is very powerful. Using Veiler's Helm is something that you should always be using if you have used any item on your Thief, so I would already be doing that anyways. The fact that I get this as an HLA is awesome. So, can't say enough good things about it. Shadow Twin, definitely good, definitely take. Up next, Shadow Maze, which again, this blows me away because I never really thought much of the Maze spell. But this is an AoE Maze spell, and they have a -4 penalty to save, or they get trapped in a maze. And this is actually insane. This is actually insane. So you can combine this with other things, right? You can stealth, walk up behind some enemies, do the shadow maze, and all of a sudden, you have an entire group of enemies trapped in a maze spell. Especially if you're combining this with Greater Malison from a wizard, a -8 penalty is significant enough to where most enemies will end up getting hit by this spell. And that is insane. That is absolutely insane to me. Just having it as a single target maze would put it as an A tier, but the fact that it's AoE is just, it's so good, dude. It's so good. And like I said, you can shadow step into a group of enemies, and as soon as your shadow step ends, you just do this. Just take them out of the fight right then and there. It almost makes the Shadowdancer a better CC'er than any other class in the game. Like, that is so good. And again, you can take it multiple times, and it's not like you can only use this once. It's so good. Such a good spell. Up next is Shadow Form. Shadow Form is very similar, if not the exact same as Spirit Form that Shamans get. However, this is actually a bit more useful for Thieves than it is for Shamans, in my opinion, because you can stack this again with a Greater Evasion, and I feel like they need physical damage reduction more than the Shaman, because the Shaman's not melee, but the Thief actually is. So, again, this only lasts for 5 rounds, so does not last long. It will give you 50% physical damage reduction and give you the effects of Improved in Biz. So just like before, it will give you those +4 to all saves, -4 penalty to all enemies trying to attack you, and you can't be directly targeted by spells, except, of course, for, you know, the bullshit enemies that can see through invisibility and don't give a shit. Which is basically every ball spawn, every dragon, every lich, every mind flayer, a couple beholders, and a few other enemies that do not fall into the list. Demogorgon, Ravager, examples like that. But like I said, you can stack this with other shit to actually make yourself fairly fucking tanky. Not as tanky as a warrior, because you're not going to be that tanky, but if you have this along with use any item and give yourself Defender of Easthaven, for example, now you're sitting on 70% damage reduction. You can slap a helmet on top of your head with use any item, and now you're uncrittable. All of a sudden, the Thief, which used to be this guy who is really, really squishy, really, really risky to get into melee, is now actually capable of going toe-to-toe with enemies. Not for long, because you don't have many attacks per round, and you don't have the HP of a fighter, or another class that has some better protections than this, but this is not bad. This is not bad at all. Now, granted, this is only for a Shadowdancer, which means you're only going to be using this on your created character. Obviously, there aren't any NPCs that can join your party, so you won't get a lot of use out of this unless you're playing a Shadowdancer. And by a lot of use, I mean no use out of this whatsoever if you're not playing a Shadowdancer, but this spell is actually pretty good. I don't know who at Beamdog was doing the HLAs for Shadowdancer, but kudos. Kudos. You guys actually made this class pretty damn great. I don't know who is in charge of this in the Dragon Disciple. I know it couldn't have been the same dude that did the Shaman, because the Shaman class sucked ass. But Dragon Disciple, Shadowdancer, A+, dude. Good job. Great shit. Alright, up next, Evasion. Evasion is B tier, just because you have Greater Evasion, and Greater Evasion's better. Evasion will give you a +4 to AC and 2 to all saves, lasts for 3 rounds. Garbage. I mean, 3 rounds, it honestly makes this C tier, really. It's not even B tier, it's C tier. 3 rounds is just too damn short to actually make a decent use out of this. So, skip it, unless you want to use Greater Evasion, in which case you can put 1 point into it, and then you can start taking Greater Evasions, which is a lot better. Greater Evasions give you a 6 bonus to armor class, and a saving throw bonus of 3. You do get a slight haste as well. It also makes you immune to normal missiles. Who cares? At this point in the game, there's not a single enemy in the game using normal missiles, so obviously that's absolutely useless. I don't know why it's even there, to be honest, but again, saving throw bonus of 3. This is going to stack with Shadow Form, giving you a massive bonus of 7 to all saves. Now, granted, you can also, if you're not if you're not a Shadowdancer, you can also have a Wizard cast improved improved invisibility on you, so you can still get that bonus of the additional saves of that, which stack with this, and all of a sudden you have a massive, massive saver of spells. If you have a Wizard cast Spirit Armor on top of you, you now have a +10 bonus to save versus spells. That is incredible. That is absolutely incredible. Again, this only lasts for 5 rounds. A lot of the really good abilities don't last very long in TOB for some sad reason. I don't know why, because Hardiness and a lot of the warrior abilities seem to last forever. But Greater Evasion only lasts for 5 rounds, so you will have to use this fairly often. However, like I said, you can take it multiple times, and if you're a Shadowdancer, it's going to be tough to take this, but if you're a regular Thief, chances are you're going to have the points for this, because you're going to, as a regular Thief, you're going to take using the item, Assassination, and really that's it, aside from a couple points into various traps, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. Really good ability. I'm going to actually leave this as S tier just because, again, you can combine this with other things, and that makes the ability way better than it is. And especially if you're, for example, you're like a fighter thief, multi or dual, having this is actually really, really good. Like I said, stacks with all the other equipment and spells you're using, makes the spell very strong. Up next, using the item, definitely S tier. I don't think there's any argument to be made here. This spell is obvious and allows you to use any item in the game. Anything you want to use, you can use. The only exception to this rule is a companion-specific item. For example, Keldorn's armor can no longer be used with use any item. If you're playing the very old school Baldur's Gate 2 game, no patches or anything like that, using the item will allow you to use literally anything, including their equipment. But honestly, at this stage of the game, why would you want to use their equipment anyways? Maybe you want to use Cern's Cloak, which gives you +1 AC and saves, which stacks with everything in the game, kind of like the Cloak of Baldur did in BG1, but you really don't want to use those companions' equipment because their equipment is shit. But the great thing about using the item is because thieves have a lot of penalties. Thieves have a lot of things they can't use. Helmets is one of them. Being a melee class and not having a helmet is extremely painful. Being able to get crit on insane difficulty is a one-shot from a lot of enemies. Most demons have 25 strength. Golems, for example, it's entirely possible for you to get crit by a golem or a demon for almost 200 physical damage. And that is just not fair at all. Having a helmet will prevent that, which combined with a Defender of Easthaven, which you can use with use any item, will make you a lot more tanky and a lot less likely to get killed. Obviously, you know, as we were talking about before, the AC doesn't really matter if you get crit. Crits don't give a shit about armor class. They'll go right through it because that's the way crits work. But using the item does give you the opportunity to protect yourself in a variety of ways. You can use a helmet, which gives you fire resistance, for example. You can use a mage scroll to cast mirror image, for example. There's all sorts of things you can do with using the item that really kind of just... There's really no limit, honestly. There really is no limit. You can slap Valor's helm on top of your head, and you can use Simulacrum now. You know, there's all sorts of things you can use with using the item that make the ability really, really fun to play with and really, really powerful. You can use this to do an enormous amount of damage. You can use this to just do something absolutely ridiculous. You wanted to make your thief a paladin? You now can. You can wield Karsamir. You want to wield some full plate armor in Karsamir? You want to roleplay as a paladin even though you're a thief? You can with using the item. Feel free. Enjoy it. Now, granted, you're not going to be proficient in two-handed two-handed swords, so you are going to get a massive penalty for using a weapon that you can't normally use with use any item. But, I mean, really, the sky's the limit with this ability. Super fun, super great. This is usually the first thing I ever take if I'm a thief or a bard. As soon as I get my first HLA, using the item is what I take first. Super really good. Can't say enough good things about it. Up next is Assassination. Bards do not get Assassination. This is for thieves only. And what this does is every single attack for the next round is a backstab. It doesn't matter if you're stealth, doesn't matter which way you're facing, it is a backstab. You will stab somebody in the front, in the face, for your backstab multiplier. As a pure thief, this spell is okay. This spell is okay. As a thief mage, this spell is getting better, because now you can stay in melee range and not have to worry about getting one shot. And for, say, a fighter thief or a fighter mage thief, you can actually stay in melee for the full round and get all your attacks off, which is absolutely devastating. Assassination on a fighter thief or a fighter mage thief will put out more physical DPS than any other class in the game for one round. There is nothing in the game that can top what you can do in one round as a fighter mage thief using Assassination. Because you're going to be dual wielding with Belm in the offhand, with improved haste on, putting you at 9 attacks per round, and you're going to be backstabbing for, I think you can actually hit ×5 with a fighter mage thief. I know for a fact you can with a fighter thief, but I think you can with a fighter mage thief. Which means your attacks are going to be hitting for like 60 damage, and you're going to attack 9 times, that's almost 500 damage. That's absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. And if you get a crit or two, oof, ridiculous, man. This will do an enormous amount of damage. This will usually drop most monsters to half HP, if not kill them outright. I believe there are... a lot of people will say that Assassination and Backstab are useless in TOB because so many enemies are immune. That is true. There are a lot of enemies who are immune. However, not everyone is. There are a variety of enemies who are not immune to Backstab, and Assassination is going to do work in those fights. Now, granted, this spell can only be taken once, which sucks. If you could take this more than once, this spell would be amazing. But even just having it once per rest is really, really strong. And for that reason, it's going to stay an S tier spell. Avoid Death is dog shit. Avoid Death is a C tier spell, lasts for 5 rounds. The rogue save versus death receives a bonus of 5. How incredibly useful. And the hit points are increased by 20. That's actually not terrible. And it says immune to death magic, but that's not actually true. I have tested this with a variety of spells, and for some weird reason, just like the shit that the Shaman gets, they do get immunity to a variety of effects that are not here. Petrification is one of them. I don't know why, but you're immune to petrification. I think Disintegration, last I checked, either that or you just successfully saved every damn time. I'm not sure. But There are also a lot of effects that go through this. This is not a true death ward. Power word kill will go through this. If you have low HP, you die. I believe I died to Finger of Death too, which doesn't make any fucking sense to me, because Finger of Death is the exact definition of death magic, in my opinion. So, the way this spell is written is really fucking strange. I believe this makes you immune to imprisonment as well, although I forgot to test imprisonment with Avoid Death for some reason. But, I mean, honestly, I don't understand this spell. I really don't. It says death magic, but you can still die to death magic. So, I guess the 20 hit points are nice. A bonus of save versus death of 5 is okay, but the spell only lasts for 5 rounds, and I don't know. I wouldn't see me taking the spell when I could be taking Evasion. If I'm a Shadowdancer, for example, I could be taking all these other ones. And then we could also be taking the traps, which we'll be talking about once we get to the bards. And I really don't see me ever taking this spell. I really don't see this ever happening. 20 HP, like I said, is decent. Save versus death bonus is whatever. But like I said, this shit would be... I guess if you were solo, then this would be nice, because how else are you going to be immune to imprisonment against a lich? So I guess you could take it if you're a solo thief, but honestly, I really don't see me ever getting use out of this, especially if I'm playing in a party. So for that reason, I'm going to keep it at C tier. Up next is Alchemy. Alchemy and Scribe scrolls, regardless of you're a wizard or a thief. I believe they actually do get different spells, and I believe they get different scrolls and potions. They're still dog shit. They're all trash. At this point in the game, there's absolutely no reason to be doing this. You don't need any of these potions. You should never be using any of these potions, with the exception of a potion of invisibility if you're a pure thief and not a Shadowdancer. This is the only one that I actually would find useful. But it's random. It's random. If you got to pick, I would say this would actually be an A tier ability, because then I could just take lots of potions of invisibility, which would be really, really useful. But you can't pick. It's fucking random. So for that reason, this is C tier. You basically, once per day, you randomly create a potion of Mind Focusing, Perception, Invisibility, Superior Healing, Regeneration, Antidote, Oil of Speed, and Frost Giant Strength. All these are shit. You're going to have 1,000,000 oils of speed. You're going to have 1,000,000 potions of healing. You're going to have 1,000,000 of all these things, except Mind Focusing and Invisibility. Those are a little bit rarer, because you can't buy those. You can't buy a massive stock of those from stores. The others you can buy. In Perception, at this point in the game, you don't need 20% to all thieving abilities. Every single one of your thieving abilities are going to be completely maxed. This is so worthless. I don't understand why this is here, to be honest. It really doesn't make sense. Really doesn't make sense. Like I said, if you could pick, this would actually be pretty decent, but you can't. So it's a C tier spell all the way for me. Up next is Scribe Scrolls. This is actually even worse, because none of these spells are spells you'd ever want to cast as a rogue. The spell magic, for some dumb reason, this doesn't cast at your level. If it did, this would actually be pretty good, but it doesn't. It casts at scroll level, which means this is going to be casting as, depending on the level of the spell, that's 3. So I think this will cast as a level 7 spell. Level 5. Either way, it's worthless. Either way, it's fucking worthless. These spells are all dog shit. You should have 1,000,000 of these at this point in time. If you ever, even if you already have 1,000,000 of these, and you do, you still don't use them, because they're worthless. You don't need to be reading Magic Missile off a scroll. You don't need to be reading Haste off a scroll. Dispel Magic off a scroll is crap, as we just said. Dire Charm, like, honestly, come on, dude. Invisibility, maybe you can make an argument for invisibility. Being able to go invisible as a rogue and backstab, or excuse me, a thief and backstab is nice, but again, it's random. You don't get to pick. If you got to pick, this would be almost decent, just because you could make a massive amount of invisibility scrolls, or a massive amount of invisibility potions are better than scrolls. So even if you could pick, you'd still only take Alchemy and not Scribe Scrolls, but the fact that you can't pick just makes it trash. And for that reason, that's 100% a C tier spell. Alright, up next, boys, we have Wild Mage. I believe Wild Mages don't actually get anything special, so this is just all mages in general. First one is extra level 6 spell. That's super simple. Extra level 6 spell. S tier all the way. Level 6 spells are great. You get protection from magical weapons. You get improved haste. Both of those are spells that are going to be casting a hell of a lot. Protection from magical energy is a spell that you're going to have up at all times and throwing a ball. Liches, high-level wizards love to cast Horde Wilting. The only way to block that is protection from magical energy. You want that shit on every single person in your party, and you're going to have an easier time doing that if you have an extra level 6 spell. That's all there is to it. Simple, great, awesome. Next spell. Up next is extra level 7 spell. Not as good. Ruby Ray is going to be your spell of choice for level 7 for breaking through enemy spell protections. Also could be possibly using a Warding Whip, maybe a Mordecai and Sword for some summons. There's a couple fun spells you can get at level 7, but not really as crucial as level 6. Like I said, protection from magical weapons and improved haste are going to be using all the time every fight. This one, not so much. It's still useful, still good, and you can't take these more than once. So there's really no reason to not ever take an extra level 7 spell. So for that reason, A tier, not bad. I wouldn't take this until I got all the better spells here, but you're definitely going to take this before, say, Alchemy or Scribe Scrolls, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. Up next, extra level 8 spell. Oh, by the way, you do have to take these in order. So you can't take level 8 until you take level 7, which sucks, but it's just the way it is. Level 8 is great, again, for what we just said before. Horde Wilting is one of the best spells in the game. Does an enormous amount of damage. AoE. Always want to take that shit. Pierce Shield is not bad. I think it's... Pierce Shield is the level 8 spell, not Pierce Magic. I always get those two confused. I never remember them. There's only a few fights where you want to use that on, but it's really nice to have this when you do. For Melisande, Demogorgon, for example, those are the two times you really want to use this. Maybe against Sendai, certain situations, just because the Drow have a lot of resistance, but really, this is mostly for Demogorgon, the Ravager, and a Melisande. And obviously, Horde Wilting works for everything in the game. So, level 8 spell, again, great, awesome, nice to have. Energy Blades, the exact same as the Cleric version. There's absolutely no difference here. Like I said, it depends on whether or not you are playing with having these all as innate abilities or whether they are taking up a level 9 spell slot. If they are, again, you never want to take this, ever. If they are not, Energy Blades is not bad. Add some extra physical damage, nice to have. I'm not going to reread it. Like I said, it's the exact same as the Cleric version. Absolutely no difference here. So, we're going to move on. Improved Alacrity, arguably the best spell in the game. Improved Alacrity allows you for the next 2 rounds to begin casting a new spell immediately. It's the exact same thing as Aura Cleansing that you get, that you might see certain Liches, Ironicus, and other wizards having, where basically, as soon as you finish a spell, instead of having to wait to the next round, you can start casting another spell. This spell has a long cast time of 9, only lasts for 2 rounds, but what you can do during those 2 rounds is devastating. You should be combining this with Robo Vecna and Amulet of Power if you can. If you're Edwin, obviously all you can use is Robo Vecna, you can't use an Amulet of Power, but this is absolutely devastating. You can unleash almost your entire spellbook if you're using Amulet of Power and Robo Vecna, because almost everything below level 4 is cast instantly. You can use 9 magic missiles, 7 acid arrows, and 6 flame arrows. Just boom, all at once. You can combine this with a time stop, although I typically don't use that unless I'm a pure wizard. You could just basically, as soon as the time stop ends, whatever target you're about to hit is dead as fuck. It is 100% dead. Nothing in the game is going to survive that barrage unless it has magic resistance, in which case you can combine this with lower resists. What I like to do against certain enemy liches, for example, is I'll do a time stop. This is only for certain certain fights, where I'll actually combine time stop with improved alacrity. What you'll do is you'll stand next to him and cast Ruby Ray. Then you'll back up, cast Ruby Ray again, back up, cast Ruby Ray again, back up, and cast Spell Strike. And what will happen is those abilities will hit in order from closeness to the target, so it will get hit with the Ruby Ray, then the second Ruby Ray, then the third Ruby Ray, and then Spell Strike at the end. And what will happen is you'll have a Lich that before had an enormous amount of spell protections is now butt-ass naked and ready to get annihilated. So if you keep backing up during the time stop, all those spells will be going after that. So all of a sudden, it's possible for you to take a Lich from full HP to 0 during a time stop by using Improved Alacrity and combining it with Robo Vecna. Even without Robo Vecna, Improved Alacrity is still good, but it's just not as good. It's just not as good. You can use the spell for all sorts of things, not just breaking enemy defenses, which is what I really like to use it for. You can combine it for doing just a ridiculous amount of damage, combine it and just chain spell chuck Horde Wiltings to do a ridiculous amount of AoE damage. You can honestly go through your whole damn rotation if you want. You can drop a Dragon's Breath, a Comet, and then a couple Horde Wiltings with Improved Alacrity and just do a ridiculous amount of AoE damage. You can use this to defend yourself quickly. Say, for example, you're fighting Lich. He casts the Wish spell to strip you of magical protections. Now you're a butt-naked mage. Very free kill. Casting Improved Alacrity over in the corner, you can instantly get all your spell protections back up. Protection from fire, mirror image, protection from acid, protection from magical energy, a stone skin, protection from magical weapons. All those spells will be cast on you instantly by combining this with a Robo Vecna, an Amulet of Power, etc. And this spell, really, like I said, there's so many things you can use it for, both offensively and defensively, that it's just an amazing spell all around. It does have a long cast time, so this isn't really something you want to use in the middle of being surrounded by enemies. You really want to get into a safe spot before you use it, or like I said, combine it with a time stop if you're a pure wizard. Normally, time stop is something, if you're a fighter mage, for example, you don't want to be casting spells during a time stop. You want to be using physical damage. But if you're a pure wizard, Improved Alacrity and time stop is a pretty good combo. For that reason, definitely S tier. Like I said, arguably the best spell in the entire game. Very, very, very powerful. Up next is Dragon Breath. Dragon's Breath is a B tier spell. Both Dragon's Breath and Comet are very similar in the sense that they are really the highest damage, like one-hit AoE spells you can do in the game. Horde Wiltings will do just a tiny bit damage less than Dragon's Breath and Comet, but they do have some other effects on top of them that make them a little bit better, and they are very quick to cast, which is nice. So Dragon's Breath has a cast time of 3, although it does have a delayed effect. So typically, what ends up happening with Dragon's Breath, if an enemy casts it on you, you have plenty of time to dodge it. Unless you are slowed, you will get out of the way of the Dragon's Breath and not get hit at all. It says 15-foot radius, and this time it actually means it. The radius is not that large. However, enemies typically don't run out of the way of this shit. So you can actually reliably hit a large amount of enemies with this for 20d 10 fire damage. They can save First Breath to take half damage and not get knocked backwards. They also get knocked backwards as well. They almost will always save. It's very, very rare that enemy will not save and will actually get knocked back. So really, you can kind of think of this as a 10d10 AoE damage spell, which isn't great. You know, it really isn't that great. But it has a very quick cast time, and like I said, if you want to unleash this with improved Alacrity, you can drop this in Comet very quickly to do a lot of AoE damage. It's also party-friendly, so you don't have to worry about hitting your party members with it, which is nice. That's actually something I've got to remind myself to talk about Comet. In fact, I'm going to skip Planetar and do Comet now real quick, just because I don't want to forget. So, very similar to Dragon's Breath, casting time of 3, duration of instant. Comet happens a lot faster, by the way. Comet will actually drop quickly. In the original game, this was not party-friendly. For the longest time, this was not party-friendly. I tested it just now before making this video, just to make sure, and it is party-friendly now. For the longest time, it said it was party-friendly, and it was not. So definitely test this in your version. If you're playing an older version of Baldur's Gate especially, if you're not playing the Enhanced Edition, test this to make sure that it's party-friendly or not before you use it in a fight. Because, like I said, for the longest time, it was not party-friendly. Also, it has been changed. In the original game, this did 10d20 damage. So, like, they're, like, opposite, right? Dragon's Breath was 20d10, Comet was 10d20. It did not do a paralysis for 3 rounds either. I think it was just a knockdown as well. But what it does now is it will knock down enemies unless they save burst paralysis, which is interesting. Not spell, but paralysis. And they will be stunned for 3 rounds. So that's cool. Like I said, it doesn't happen often. But if it does happen, great. You know, we talked about Implosion. Implosion is awesome. Stunning anybody at this stage in the game is a death sentence. Stunning AoE is awesome. For 3 rounds, extra awesome. But again, they have a chance to save, which will usually happen, so don't expect this to happen. But it does do 10d10 fire damage with no save, so you can expect enemies to save versus Dragon's Breath. This is going to be doing the exact same thing, except when they fail their save here, instead of taking more damage, they'll be stunned. So in a sense, Comet's better than Dragon's Breath. So for that reason, Dragon's Breath is a B, Comet is an A. They're okay. They're not amazing. I would definitely take this spell on any mage, regardless, just because they are useful for dropping some good AoE damage, but they're definitely not improved Alacrity or Summon Planetar. So up next, Planetar. It doesn't matter if it's light or dark, they have the exact same spells and abilities with the exception of Holy Word and Unholy Word, which are irrelevant. You really don't ever care about using those anyways because they're not all that great. But what's amazing about a Planetar is the Planetar with SCS will have all of its spells cast instantly. It will have Insect Plague, which we all know how incredibly obnoxious Insect Plague is. It will have Heal, which will cast instantly, allowing you to instantly heal somebody to full HP, making it awesome for a backup cleric that can run into melee to fight. You can also use it to resurrect party members. It also has a variety of other nasty spells such as Firestorm, Flame Arrow, etc., etc. This thing has spells for days. You will actually not be able to use all the spells a Planetar comes with before it is unsummoned. Very, very strong. Decent cast time of 5, lasts for 4 rounds plus 1 per level. It attacks using the Silver Sword, which has a chance at a -2 save to decapitate. It will also dispel magic on hit, and it has a very decent THAC0. In BG2, this Planetar is very, very strong. In TOB, they're not squishy, but they're not tanky either. So they will die fairly quickly if they're getting focused, because enemies are going to be using Greater Whirlwind, Critical Strike, etc. So physical damage fighters will be able to break a Planetar pretty quickly, but if you go out of your way to keep your Planetar safe, you can basically have a very, very powerful healer to keep your front line alive, do some extra damage, soak some extra hits. This spell is S tier all the way. Absolutely devastating. A Planetar in Baldur's Gate 2 can solo pretty much any encounter for you, and in Throne of Ball, it is still very, very strong. Can't say enough good things about it. Really recommend it. This is probably the first thing I take on every single mage when I hit 3 mil XP. Improved Alacrity is second. Planetar always comes first. We already talked about Comet, Scribe Scrolls, and Alchemy. These are both dog shit. They do get different spells. They do get different spells compared to the rogues. For Scribe Scrolls for Mage, you get Magic Missile, Shield, Arrow, Mirror Image, which is a shame because this would actually be great for a Thief. Minute Meteor, Spell Deflection, Improved Invis, Ice Storm, Oracle, and Chaos. These are all shit. At this point of the game, you should be casting these before a fight starts, because don't forget, every time you use a scroll, there's an extra delay, right? It's not like you're casting a spell instantly from memory. when you use a scroll, you have a read delay, which is what I like to call it, where you have to read the scroll first, and then you start actually casting. So it's not like if you read a scroll of Magic Missile that you just go, bam, Magic Missile. You'll read it for a couple seconds, and then you'll start casting Magic Missile. So these are terrible. Again, these are terrible. You should have tons of these in your bank by now, and you never use them because of the reason I just mentioned. And throwing a ball, fights are going way too quickly for you to have time to read spells. I guess you could say, well, I can take an extra stone skin because I made an improved invisibility scroll and I can cast that before a fight and save myself a level 4 slot. Whatever, dude, good for you. If you want to waste your time doing that, fucking go for it. I guess it's, I mean, you, after a certain point, you have to take Scribe Scrolls or Alchemy, right? You can easily take every single one of these abilities as a pure mage. If you're a mage multi-class, you're not going to be able to take everything you want, which sucks, but I mean, what's left is Scribe Scrolls and Alchemy, so you're not really losing out on much. C tier all the way. It's not RP tier. It's not that bad, but it's not great either. Shit. I would never take it. Up next is Alchemy. Again, just as useless, if not more so, because these are all potions that you would never use as a mage. At least as a thief, you could say, invisibility potion. That's handy. I'll take it. None of these you'd ever use as a mage. Absolutely none. You are going to be immune to fire and cold from spells. Invisibility, you have a better spell than invisibility. Stone Form is useless. I don't even think you can use Stone Form. I think that's fighter only. Oil of Speed, you have improved haste at this point. Fire Breath, you're not going to be doing that. These are shit. You'd never use these ever in a million years, so there's no reason to ever take them. These two abilities are both crap, both C tier. Never take these ever. I really don't think you needed a guide on me telling you how to do that, but you know what I'm saying, boys. These things, they're so bad. They're so bad. I honestly don't know. I guess BioWare and Black Isle really just like having abilities that aren't super overpowered. I guess if every single one of these was equally good, it would just make it really hard to choose. So they added a couple shitty meme RP tier fucking HLAs just because they could, I guess. I don't know, dude. I don't know. All right, up next is Fighter and Druid. We're going to talk about the Fighter HLAs first, then we'll talk about the Druid ones, which are pretty much the same. There are a couple of special differences, though. First up is Whirlwind Attack. Whirlwind Attack is C. This spell is dog shit. You should never take it unless you're going for Greater Whirlwind, which is also dog shit, and we'll talk about why in just a second. So, this will set your attacks to 10, and you suffer a -4 THAC0 penalty. Wow, that's awesome. You know who else has 10 attacks per round? Every fighter in the game. Because you have Grand Mastery, and then if for some strange reason having 9 attacks per round with improved haste is not enough, you can throw Belm or Kundane or Scarlet Ninjato in your offhand. Well, they can't use Scarlet Ninjato. Other classes can. And this will put you at 10 attacks, and that will already put you at 10 attacks per round. So you don't need Greater Whirlwind. You don't need Whirlwind or Greater Whirlwind. Greater Whirlwind, excuse me. Fucking W's are hard to say. This ability sucks. The only reason you take it is if you're taking Greater Whirlwind Attack. If you weren't dual wielding, that's the only time these abilities become useful, is you absolutely insist on using a two-hander. But the problem is two-handers suck in this game. For one, you have to take Greater Whirlwind, which sucks, and every time you use this ability, it only lasts for 1 round, and it will prevent you from using Critical Strike, for example, which we'll talk about in just a few minutes. So what ends up happening is you're using a two-hander, you're like, I'm going to use the Ravager, it's awesome, I'm going to use the Silver Sword, it's awesome, I'm going to get Saravok, I'm going to make him use Greater Whirlwind, I'm going to get Keldorn with Karsamir, and he's going to tear shit up with Greater Whirlwind, it's going to be awesome. At no point in the game does using Greater Whirlwind with any two-hander in the game out DPS a fighter using Critical Strike and dual wielding. It just doesn't happen. That's just not how this game works. Two-handed weapons in Baldur's Gate are shit. They do not do nearly enough damage to make up for the fact that you are denied getting an additional attack per round from an offhand weapon, which sucks. It really sucks. I don't know why they did that. I don't know why they made one-handed weapons so much better because of that, but they did. And especially if you're using Belm or Kundane or an offhand like Defender of Easthaven, which is absolutely mandatory if you're a pure fighter and try to go toe-to-toe with enemies. So you just never can take this ability. You just can't. You just can't. On insane difficulty, you are taking way too much damn damage to be using a two-handed weapon in melee unless you have a ridiculously beefy front line standing in front of you, in which case you can kind of maybe hide behind people and use Greater Whirlwind with a two-handed weapon to attack from a longer range, but really it's risky, dude. Because Elite Fire Giants will pop an Oil of Speed and Greater Whirlwind, and their Greater Whirlwind is actually useful because they hit hard as shit with their 22 plus strength on insane difficulty, and they will tear you apart. They'll tear you apart in seconds. So, I mean, it's just, this spell sucks. This spell really does suck. Compared to Critical Strike, Greater Whirlwind is absolute dog shit. I have done the math for every single sword in the game. The Ravager becomes really, really close, but honestly, if you compare it to Axe the Unyielding, which also has a Decapitate effect, and combine that with Critical Strike and Improved Haste, you just never use this. The only argument you can make for this is like, oh, Swashbucklers give this. That's not bad. Thieves have very few attacks per round, so getting Whirlwind is actually nice. That's true. As a swashbuckler, I would consider taking Whirlwind. As a fighter, never in a million years. Critical Strike is just way, way better. Like I said, I did the math. With every single two-hander, they all come up short. Even when you add in the effect, even when you add in the ability to decapitate, they all come up short, man. It sucks. Doesn't matter if you're using Karsamir, the Ravager +6, it doesn't matter. They fall short. Critical Strike is better. Unless you're a swashbuckler, you should never be taking Whirlwind Attack. It's shit. Also shit are Deathblow and Greater Deathblow. Deathblow will instantly kill any creature struck that's 10th level or lower, and Greater Deathblow will kill any creature that's level 12th level or lower when struck by the warrior. In the base game, these two abilities are actually not bad. In the base game, you could kill Mind Flayers. There are a handful of Beholders that are susceptible to this, as well as a variety of humanoid enemies that will get struck and killed immediately by Greater Deathblow. That is not the case in SCS. This does not work in SCS anymore. The enemies are too high level to make these two abilities work. The very first pack of mobs that you fight and throw in a ball are going to be the ones that after you leave the planar, whatever the hell it is, the pocket plane. So, like, it will be Gromnir's Men, right? Gromnir's Men. In the original game, you could use Deathblow to wipe them all out very quickly. In SCS, they're going to have HLAs. That means they're level 18 or higher, which means Deathblow is not going to do a damn thing. This ability becomes shit in SCS, don't ever take it. If you're playing unmodded on normal, Greater Deathblow might actually not be bad for clearing up stuff pretty quickly. I personally would rather take Critical Strike, but if you want to take it, you can. However, with SCS, never in a million years. Complete waste of time, don't bother. Summons are easily taken out by a death spell. There are a variety of things to deal with summons. You should not be taking Greater Deathblow for summons either. I can think of no reason why you should use this spell. Up next, Resist Magic, also shit. For 4 rounds, the warrior's magic resistance is set to 50%. The problem with magic resistance is it's not guaranteed. Drizzt, for example, has 90 magic resistance. I still land spells on Drizzt. It happens. That's just how it works. Magic resistance is not 100%. It's not a flat damage reduction like Hardiness is. It is not a flat, I am always going to resist 50% of the damage from this spell. I am always going to resist this spell. That's not how it works. Anything has a chance to pierce magic resistance, which sucks. And again, combining this with the fact that it only lasts 4 rounds makes this worthless, dude. If you are trying to take less damage from magic, you should be wearing equipment that gives you fire resistance. You should be having a wizard cast protection spells on you, and then try to avoid getting hit with a dispel magic. Using resist magic is just not useful. There is no point. All of your points should be going into Hardiness, and they should be going into Critical Strike if you're a fighter. Those are the 2 abilities you want to take. Resist magic, it just doesn't cut it. It's just at no point of the game is resist magic actually useful. It sucks. It's a shame it sucks, but it sucks. Also, if you're like, well, what if I use it with a monk? That's stupid because it sets your magic resistance to 50%. It doesn't actually add. It's not cumulative. Now, you can use this and then put on equipment with magical resistance. But like I said, only lasts 4 rounds. It's not like Berserking, which lasts a turn, or Hardiness, which is going to last over a turn depending on your level. So it's just, you can't really use this preemptively before a fight either. So at no point does this spell actually become really useful in my opinion. I would never take it. Like I said, there's way better abilities that a fighter actually gets. This one sucks. And like I said, you could combine this with, say, a fighter illusionist, for example. You still wouldn't want to take it, because then you have a mage that can actually cast good protections on yourself, making this absolutely superfluous. So there's just, at no point does this ever become useless. That's the other thing I forgot to say. As a lot of people like to say that a fighter illusionist will benefit from Greater Whirlwind Attack. You know what it benefits more from? Critical Strike. Take this shit instead. Don't take this shit. The only reason you'd ever use this is if you absolutely insist on role-playing with a 2-hander. But it is way better to be dual-wielding. Just way better. Alright, up next, Power Attack. Power Attack's actually pretty good. Power Attack will make every single attack landed in the next, I believe it's 2 rounds, right? Yeah, 2 rounds. They have to save for his death at a -4 penalty or get stunned. Awesome. That's great. Stunning Blow is the only saving grace of a monk. That ability is actually really good. This is a better Stunning Blow. For 2 rounds, every hit you do is going to stun somebody or force them to save at the very least. When you combine this with improved haste, for example, from a wizard, and you're doing 9 attacks per round, that is 9 chances at a -4 penalty for your enemy to get stunned, which means every single attack from every single party member is going to land on that person, and they're going to die in 2 seconds regardless of what they are. That is awesome. That's really great. This is not amazing. This is not super, super strong. Critical Strike, in my opinion, is better, but Power Attack definitely has its uses. There are going to be times where you're going to be fighting enemies with a lower THAC0 than you would need, or you're fighting an enemy who has a buttload of protections on. Don't forget, enemies can cast HLAs too. So if you're fighting, say, a thief, for example, who has who has evasion up along with other spell protections, or a cleric up who has aura flaming death and a couple other spell protections, making them have a higher AC than would normally be that would normally be existing in the game, and you can't hit them with a remove magic, a power attack will make them die in seconds. So this becomes fairly useful in that regard. I would put this at an A, possibly S tier, just because it actually does have a lot of nice uses. In fact, I'm going to put it at S tier just because. I had it as A originally, but I think, honestly, the more I think about it, the better this actually is. Because I have used this in the past with great success, and it's really, really, really strong. Up next, Critical Strike, quite possibly the best HLA that fighters get along with Hardiness, and it makes every single attack in the next round a critical hit. So not only does this guarantee that every single strike's a critical hit, it also guarantees that every single attack lands. It's as if you stun them with power attack, which is really, really nice. And again, for certain enemies that have a ridiculously high AC, this is actually really, really useful. Most of the time, however, you're just using this to do extra damage, right? Most of the time, you're just using this for the critical strike, which makes you do extra damage, which is really, really nice. When you're attacking with Korgan, who's sitting on, 18 or 22 strength, depending on what equipment you're giving him, you're using Axe the Unyielding, which is already dealing a ridiculous amount of damage, and then you're having it a critical hit on top of it. Even if they got a helmet on, this is still doing a lot of fucking damage. This is still really, really useful. This is your bread and butter when you're a fighter. If you're a fighter mage, you're never going to be using this ability, which sucks because you should always be weaving a spell in. This does use your ability for the round, right? If you cast Critical Strike, that means you can't cast Breach. You can't cast Protection from Magic Weapons. You can't cast Skull Trap. You can only use one ability per round. And that's the reason that Fighter Illusionist is such a shit class. It's not a shit class. It's one of the best classes in the game. But compared to a Berserker Duel to Mage, it's just not as good. It's just not as strong. Because the HLAs that you get from a fighter are not useful. They are not useful at all. The only time you'd want to use this as a fighter illusionist is if you had no spells left, or it's not worth using a spell in the first place. And if it's not worth using a spell in the first place, a critical strike isn't going to do much to you. It's going to make the enemy die 2 seconds faster than they would have died anyway. But if you're a pure fighter or a fighter thief or some other hybrid that's not a mage, critical strike is awesome. Very, very good spell. Can't say enough good things about it. This is where I typically put most of my points with my fighters. Up next is Smite. Smite can only be taken once. And what this will do is it's just like Critical Strike, but it will also knock enemies back and stunning them for a round. This lasts for 2 rounds. The problem is, when you knock an enemy back in melee, you're no longer hitting it because it's getting knocked back. It's just like the dragon knockback, which means it's super obnoxious for you to try to catch up and hit them. What I have found use for this is with Mazzy, for example. If fire giants are chasing her down, she can pop Smite and she can start knocking them back. But the problem is, that doesn't work on fire giants because they're large creatures. So it's like, wow, that would be really awesome. You could use this for, say, a dragon or some other creature that's about to beat the shit out of you. It doesn't work on large creatures. So you really would only be using this on, say, some summons like a Planetar, for example. It's nice to knock them back, obviously. Gosh, I'm trying to search my head. What could possibly be fighting you when you want to knock them back? A Mind Flayer, maybe? Mind Flayer would be decent. Mind Flayer, knocking back a Mind Flayer would be good. But, I mean, most of the enemies that you're really worried about getting in physical range are the ones that it doesn't work on. That are creatures that are too damn large, which sucks. But, I mean, there are a couple enemies where this is nice for. But I really would recommend using this on a ranger, and by ranger I mean an archer, as opposed to someone who's actually meleeing. Because when you're knocking them back in melee, you can't hit them anymore, which sucks, which makes this kind of useless in that regard. I don't take this on Korgan. I don't. Unless I guess you could take it as like an emergency, right? Where Korgan's taking way too much damage, the person on him is hasted and is beating the shit out of him, so you can't outrun him, so you can pop Smite and knock him back real quick and then run away. In which case, I guess you could make an argument that where it'd be decent there. I have this as A tier. It's not as good as Critical Strike, and you can only take it once anyways, so I don't know. It's okay. I find this way more useful on Mazzy than any other fighter. I wouldn't recommend using this unless you are trying to defend yourself, not kill something. In which case, it becomes actually pretty decent. Up next is Warcry. Warcry is possibly one of the only RP tier HLAs that exist. It is so... And it's not that it's actually worthless, but it's so close to being worthless, I can't classify this as anything other than RP without, feeling like I'm insulting other C-tier spells. Because there are a variety of C-tier spells that might end up getting used. You will never use Warcry. This is the exact same as the level 2 spell Horror. Enemies within 15 feet have to run in fear if they don't make their save or a spell. That is literally identical to the ability you get in Baldur's Gate 1 as a level 3 mage. That is disgusting. This is a high-level ability. And it is identical to the spell you get as a level 3 mage. Technically, you could cast it as a level 1 mage if you have it on a scroll. What the hell, dude? Was this like some kind of weird nod to to like Diablo Barbarian or something? I'm so confused why this spell exists. It makes no sense at all. Absolutely atrocious. If this was no save, then this would actually become pretty decent. This would actually be pretty good, hitting any enemy that's not immune to fear. Not bad. I still wouldn't put it at S tier, honestly. But the fact that they get to save on top of it with no penalty? Dude, what a complete waste of an ability. Don't ever take that shit unless you're role-playing, dudes. Up next is Hardiness. Hardiness is probably the only other S tier spell that fighters get. And again, this is not for fighter mages. You don't need this as a fighter mage. It's a complete waste of an HLA. But as a pure fighter, a fighter thief, fighter cleric, really anything that's not a fighter mage, Hardiness is amazing. 40% damage reduction is huge. This is absolutely critical in throwing a ball when, like I said, fire giants, dragons, good lord, excuse me, are attacking almost 10 times per round, dealing double damage on insane difficulty. They will rip you to pieces in seconds. I have clips of my character going from full HP to 0 in 0.2 seconds while fighting 3 fire giants. 0.2 seconds. I had 170 HP and I died in 0.2 seconds while fighting fire giants. It is absolutely insane how much physical damage you take in throwing a ball. You need this. You need this. You need Defender of Easthaven, you need Phobane, or you need Black Razor. You need to combine all those things, and even then, you still need a Cleric on backup to give yourself regeneration and heal, because you are taking so much physical damage in Baldur's Gate throwing a ball. This spell is absolutely mandatory. I don't ever have this not up on my fighters in throwing a ball. It's mandatory, 100%. Again, unless you're a fighter or mage, then in which case this becomes useless because you have Stone Skin. If you're taking this as a fighter mage, you're wasting your HLAs. Alright, up next is Energy Blades, just like before, the exact same as before, absolutely no difference. If this is taking up a level 7 spell slot, don't use it, otherwise it's not bad. Storm of Vengeance, same thing. Elemental Summoning, same thing. Greater Elemental Summoning is just like the Elemental Summoning, except instead of having it a chance to summon an Elemental Prince, it summons one. We already talked about them before, why they're so good. Dispelling magic on every hit is awesome. Fairly decent amount of HP, good Thaco. They also have some abilities. I think, I'm pretty sure the Earth one does an Earthquake. The fire one does a flame arrow or a fire strike, and then the air elemental does whirlwind, I think. Not the whirlwind ability, it's like some weird air ability. I mean, the abilities are okay. They're not really great. The main reason, like I said, you use these is to have some extra oomph, having a chance to dispel, and not having a chance. Every single time they land a hit, it's a dispel magic, which is really strong. And for that reason, I like these. I have it as an A tier spell. I wouldn't take a lot of it. I would take it maybe once just because it is nice to have. Because like I said, it only lasts 1 turn. If this lasted longer, like some of the other summons you get, like a Planetar, for example, that can last 2 turns or more, I would say this would be a lot better. But the fact it only lasts 1 turn, it's got to be A tier for sure. Global Blade's just as shitty as the other one. No reason to take it. Summon Deva and Fallen Deva. This is misleading because when I first saw this, I thought, oh, this is like the cleric version of Planetar. It's got to be good, right? Wrong. This is not a Planetar. Do not ever convince yourself that these are Planetars. These are not Planetars. These are the shitty versions of Planetars. They do not get the same spells, not even close. They don't get really any spell good that I remember. They don't get awesome resurrection spells. They don't get awesome damage spells. I think they have global blades and a couple other worthless spells like Holy Word, shit like that. And they don't have the Silver Sword either. So they're not doing massive amounts of damage and decapitating people. They actually do come with the... oh my gosh, I can't think of it. Mace of Disruption +2. So these things are actually fairly decent at plowing through undead, because every time you get hit as an undead, you have to save versus death or be destroyed. So these are actually decent for that regard, and they are fairly tanky when they come in the game at 3 mil XP. By the time you're getting in late throwing a ball, however, these are completely useless. They will die in seconds. They do not have the same spells that Planetar have to defend themselves, nor do they have the same spells to do damage. And like I said, Mace of Disruption is great versus undead, pretty shitty versus everything else. It is not a Planetar. They do not have the same nasty abilities they get. Do not convince yourself otherwise. If you're a paladin, you can take this spell, although obviously they take Deva, not Fallen Deva. If you are a cleric and you are not using this as a level 7 spell slot, obviously it's not bad. If you are, however, don't ever take it. This should be Implosion, Mass Raise Dead, and if you're a multi-class or a Flaming Death, don't ever take this shit. It's dog shit. Alright, last 2 spells here for Druid. These are Druid only. These are 2 spells that got changed quite a bit with SCS. In the original game, the Fire Elemental Transformation and Earth Elemental Transformation were not really all that great. They gave you different stats, they gave you different attacks per round, and that was it. The tokens, however, are fucking incredible. The Fire Elemental token will make you completely immune to fire. I believe it puts you at 4 attacks per round, hasted. Decent strength of 22, 25 dex, so it has a nice boost to AC there. Will cause fire damage to anyone who hits you, and your damage will now do physical and fire damage. This is not great. Because when you have this token equipped, you can't cast spells. You're literally, it's just like transforming, just like the werewolf transformation token, just like the other tokens that you get for druid shapeshifting. So it makes you a little bit better in melee, which isn't bad, but you can't cast spells. So I really never take this. Unless I just am about to take an enormous amount of fire damage, in which case putting this on will allow you to block the fire damage, in which case that makes it pretty decent. I have it as A tier, but I really only ever use this when I'm about to take fire damage. What you really want right here is the Earth Elemental token. This one is fucking busted. You get a massive boost of strength. You're at 25 strength. You are put at 3 attacks per round. Your dex drops to 10, so you do get hit more often. But what's absolutely amazing about this, aside from the fact that you do ridiculous amounts of crushing damage, which is the best damage type in the game, is you get 50% resistance to physical damage. This stacks with Hardiness. This stacks with Armor of the Faith. If you are a fighter druid, if you cast Armor of the Faith, cast Hardiness, and then put on the Earth Elemental Transformation token, you are now completely 100% immune to physical damage. This doesn't make you immune to physical damage effects. For example, if someone's hitting you with Flail of the Ages, you will still take that the elemental damage. However, you are immune to physical damage, as in you no longer take physical damage. That's insane to me. That's awesome. If you can combine this with other spells to give you resistances to the elements, protection from fire, cold, protection from magical energy, you are practically immune to everything in the game for a short time, which is pretty damn fucking strong. There's one of the reasons I want to make a fighter druid again is just to play around with this some more. In the original version of SCS, this actually gave you 100% immunity. It was bugged, and they fixed it, so now it's only 50. So a pure druid can't make as much use out of this as, say, a fighter druid can, but this is still really damn strong. Armor of the Faith is going to put you at 20% damage reduction as a pure druid, and a little bit less if you're a multi. But like I said, you can combine that with other things that give you damage reduction, and holy shit, you are one tanky motherfucker wearing this thing. It is really, really, really good. Can't say enough good things about it. This is the spell I usually take first if I'm a druid, and then I start taking a Mass Raise Dead and Implosion, just because it's so damn strong. And like I said, Jaheira actually becomes one of the best companions in the game. If she is alive at this point, she is literally one of the best companions of the game. Take this, take Hardiness, cast Armor of the Faith, and she is immune to physical damage. Amazing. Amazing tank. Alright, up next, we have a Cleric Ranger. I don't believe anything changes on the Cleric Ranger page. The only thing we get is the only other RP tier spell, which is Tracking. Tracking is the exact same as the way Infravision worked in the original Baldur's Gate 1. As in, the level 1 mage spell, Infravision, does the exact same thing Tracking does. It shows you that there are enemies off screen. That's all it does. That's all it does. This is a high level ability, and it shows you that there are enemies off screen in the Fog of War. How amazing is that? I always take this on my Rangers, just because I like to roleplay. Actually, I don't. This is terrible. Never take this spell. Why would you ever take this spell? Only reason to take this spell is if you're actively roleplaying. In which case, it's a fun spell, but holy shit, it's so trash. I don't understand why Ranger gets shafted so bad. Ranger, aside from Monk, is arguably the worst class in the game. They have severe restrictions. You can only be good. If you go below 5 reputation, you fall and lose a variety of stats. You cannot access Grand Mastery like a fighter can. You cannot dual class, and you don't get access to cool weapons like the Paladin can. The Paladin gets the Purifier. That's awesome. The Paladin gets the Purifier. Karsamir, okay, useful in certain situations. Ranger doesn't get none of that. Ranger gets nothing. Their class-specific item is Montolio's Cloak, which gives them +2 Thaco in their offhand. Holy shit. Could there possibly be anything more underwhelming than that? Thieves get a hood that make them immune to backstab, and I thought that was worthless. Because there you can get items that make you that give you stone skin. I thought the Thieves Hood was worthless. Montolio's Cloak is quite possibly the most worthless class-specific item in the game. And it's just a shame. Rangers get shafted so hard. Archers are still good, and Stalkers, kind of fun to play, but holy shit, man. The Ranger class is shit. And then their only special HLA they get is extra shit. I don't know if, like, somebody at Black Isle just absolutely hated Rangers and hated Drizzt. Like, there's one dude who's like, let's make a class like Drizzt. He's awesome. And then some other dude is like, fuck Drizzt. You know what? I'm the one in charge of making their spells. You're getting Tracking as an HLA, and you're getting Montolio's Cloak. Absolutely worthless. Can't stand it. Such a shame. Dog shit. Get it out of here. All right. Last class here, boys. Last class. Last couple HLAs here. The first ones we're going to go over. These are eligible for Thieves as well. All these abilities you see here are Bard, And the first 3 are also eligible for regular thieves. Remember, the first thief that we were looking at was a Shadowdancer. So we had the Shadowdancer HLAs. We're going to talk about the other 3 thief HLAs now. Set Spike Trap is awesome. This spell does so much damage, it's absolutely ridiculous. 20d6, it has a potential to do up to 120 damage. No save, by the way. Most spells, like Dragon's Breath, for example, you can save to do half damage. There is no save here. No save at all. And you can use multiple of these. You can take this many times. If you want, I believe there's actually a limit of 5 traps you can have set at once. So you can't, like, drop 100 of these and then start the fight. But I think actually you may have in the original game. I'm not sure now. I don't remember if there was a cap in the original Baldur's Gate 2. Because I know Spike Trap, or Skull Trap you can cast forever. But, I'm not sure. But either way, this spell does an absurd amount of damage. This spell will one-shot pretty much anything in the game that's being spawned. You can drop this under a Lich in Baldur's Gate 2, and as soon as it spawns, it will die instantly. You can use this to put Kangax into Phase 2 right away. You can use this to one-shot Irenicus at the very end of Baldur's Gate 2 in Hell. You can use this to one-shot Demogorgon. This is an absurdly powerful trap. You can use this for so many things. I almost never use this because it is so damn strong. I would consider this so cheesy that I almost never use it. Kind of like Mislead. I just never use it. With the exception of maybe, like, I just want to get through an area real quick. I don't give a shit. I'm going to drop a Spike Trap. That would be the time I'd use this. Maybe I'll have some more use out of it playing with Ascension or some other stronger mods, but, like, the spell is absurdly busted. Ridiculously strong. So if you want to make this game a cakewalk, take Set Spike Trap. S tier all the way. Up next, Set Exploding Trap. This spell is not nearly as good. This is like Delayed Blast Fireball, and if they save or spell, they will take half damage. It says they will knock the victims off their feet. So it makes it seem out like this is like Dragon's Breath. However, they don't get stunned for some reason. They don't get stunned. So it does knock them away, which I guess is nice, but they're not stunned, so you can't, like, follow up with a buttload of damage. So it's not nearly as good in that regard. In addition, this will hit allies, so unlike Spike Trap, which is party-friendly, Set Exploding Trap will actually hit party members too, which sucks. So I'm not a big fan of this. I almost never use it. I put this at B tier just because it does do a decent amount of damage, and if you're solo, obviously you're going to get plenty of use out of it. But really, why would you ever use this when Spike Trap does twice as much damage with no save? Like, literally. You can save here to take half damage, no save for Spike Trap, and Spike Trap does twice as much damage. So why would you ever take Exploding? Terrible. Up next is Set Time Trap. Set Time Trap is also S tier. This is basically a time stop in a trap. Busted. It says it lasts 10 seconds, but I don't feel like it really lasts 10 seconds. I feel like it lasts at least 2 rounds. It definitely is shorter than a regular Mage time stop, but it doesn't feel like it only lasts a round and a half. It doesn't. You can use this for a variety of things. You can use this to go for a backstab, like it says here. You can use this to reposition. If you're a bard, to set some to cast some spells to defend yourself. If you're a thief, I mean, like I said, there's all sorts of things you can do with this, especially if you're a multi-class, dude. Especially if you're a multi-class. If you're a fighter thief, for example, drop a time stop trap, and you just basically cast time stop, man. You can walk into melee and beat the shit out of anyone, and they can't defend themselves. Amazing, dude. Super strong. Again, I don't use this too much just because it is so powerful. It's very colorful, too. It has a lot of pretty colors when you cast it, which is nice, but very, very strong. Whether you're a bard, a thief, or a multi-class, these two right here are very, very, very powerful. Both S tier, 100% all the way. Like I said, I don't use them all that often because they are busted. Don't forget, you cannot set traps in combat, by the way. However, you can get around this by blinding your thief. If your thief can't literally see anybody around him, it thinks it's out of combat and will allow you to set a time stop trap. So what you can do, if you really want to be a cheesy piece of shit, is you cast Power Word Blind on yourself because there's no save, and then you set a time stop trap, and then you just beat the shit out of everybody. And then you set another one, repeat, repeat, repeat until everything on screen is dead. And don't forget, you can take this multiple times, so if you want to do that shit all day, you most certainly can. Because being blind doesn't matter when your enemy can't move. You land every attack during a time stop. Don't forget that, boys. Every single attack lands during a time stop. Which is just, it's insane, dude. It's actually insane. So for that reason, time stop trap, also S tier. Oh my gosh, I'm getting a little hoarse now. Only 2 more, boys. Only 2 more abilities. Enhanced Bard Song. Also S tier. This spell is also very, very powerful. Now, what this will do is it will replace the Bard Song, right? So if you're a Skald or a Jester, that song is gone. You have this now. So the Jester doesn't do the offensive Bard Song anymore. It has this shit. But this is really good. It gives you a 10-point bonus to AC, 10% bonus to magic resistance, and the song will give his allies 4 to hit, 4 damage, -4 armor, immunity to fear, stun, confusion, 5% magic resistance, and normal immunity to and immunity to normal weapons. Last two don't really matter. Good lord, can't stop burping. At this stage in the game, immunity to normal weapons is relevant. 5% MR is also useless. Immunities are nice. 4 Thaco damage is nice, as well as 4 armor class. I almost never use this on my Bard, and I'll tell you why. Because with Bard, you can also get using the item, which means you can use any item, which means you can use Valor's Helm, slap that shit on your head, make a Simulacrum, and have that Simulacrum go stand in the corner and have him do the Bard song. That way, Hardiness, or if your main character is a Bard, you can still be casting spells and still be actively fighting. Just like the regular Bard song, as soon as you stop using this, as soon as you do anything else, the song cancels and you lose the effects. So, I find the most use out of this is combining it with Valor Helm, allowing me to do a Simulacrum. And that way, my entire party gets the benefits of this shit. And it's really, really incredible. This 4 to hit is super useful for most classes. Obviously, at this stage in the game, a fighter doesn't need 4 to hit. But having 4 to damage is nice. 4 damage is nice, especially if your wizards are still using Melspinute Meteors. Having 4 extra damage on that is a lot. -4 AC, again, when you combine that with something like Greater Evasion or a Flaming Death, one of the other spells or abilities that gives you AC, combining with this, all of a sudden, at one point where you thought you were kind of scraping the ceiling with -10, -15 AC, it is very possible for you to get into the -20s with this shit. And at that point, Planetars are starting to miss fairly regularly. Fire giants, dragons, demons, anything with 25 strength really, or close to it, are not going to miss often, if at all. But when you combine all of these things together, even they will start to miss a handful of times. And that can make the difference between life and death, man. In addition to the fact that it gives you immunities to hit and damage, and a 10-point bonus to AC, so when you're doing this on your Simulacrum, for example, it makes it pretty damn tanky, dude. Pretty damn tanky. And if you're not using a Simulacrum, you can combine this with Defensive Spin, for example, on Hardiness, and then start using the Bard Song, and all of a sudden he's practically immune to damage. Because he's going to almost never get hit, and when he does get hit, he's going to have Mirror Images, Stone Skin, etc., making him nearly impossible to take down with physical damage, which is great. So, all in all, spell very useful. I know in the original versions, I do want to talk about this real quick, I know in the original game you could actually stack Bard Songs, right? If you had a couple Bards, or Simulacrums, for example, using a scroll of Simulacrum, shit like that, you could actually have this ability stacked, giving yourself a massive bonus to hit, damage, and AC. That doesn't work anymore, at least in my version of Baldur's Gate, it does not work. So, depending on which version you're using, this spell could actually be even better than it was originally. And I don't know why I keep saying spell, it's an ability, not a spell, sorry. This doesn't take up a spell slot. And finally, the last other ability that's practically RP tier, but not quite as bad, so it's a C tier spell. Magic Flute. Obviously a reference to the great Mozart. When you're using this ability, you summon a flute that has a resist fear for 1 charge, a glow of invulnerability for 1 charge, or a delayed blast fireball with 3 charges. How incredibly fucking useless. If you're using this shit from your bard at this stage in the game, you're already making a mistake. But then again, like I said, I mean, obviously you're not going to take Scribe Scrolls or Alchemy, but don't forget, every time you take Magic Flute, I think actually you can only take it once. I'm fairly certain you can only take Magic Flute once. I'm like 99% sure you can only take Magic Flute once, so I guess it's not that big a deal. But like, why would you take that when you could take a set Spike Trap, set Time Trap, using the item, Greater Evasion? You know, there's so many better things you could be taking. So many better things you could be taking. The Flute does last for 1 day. I know for a fact you can rest and then make another Flute and then make another Flute, so you could have 3 Flutes potentially. But these can only be used by bards, or by people who have using the item. So I guess you could give it to a thief who could then cast Globe of Invulnerability on himself, but why would you do that? A thief can use any item. It can take a scroll of Globe of Invulnerability if he really wanted to. Delayed Blast Fireball, again, why would you be dropping these as traps when you have these as traps? It doesn't make sense logically. Resist Fear is a useful spell, but like I said, at this point in the game, like, you probably haven't gotten this far if you aren't using Resist Fear as a cleric spell or as the bard itself. So again, it's not useful either. So I don't understand what they were doing with the flute. If it gave different abilities or different spells, this might be useful, but as it stands, like, these are spells I never use on a bard anyways. Delayed Blast Fireball, you can't even get in the original game because bards are capped at level 6 spells. So I don't know where they're going with this. I really don't. But like I said, C tier, just because I guess you can make use out of Global Invulnerability, or maybe you're Cleric's dead, you're fighting a Melisson, you absolutely need a Resist Fear because she's about to summon more demons, and damn it, if only you had a Resist Fear, there you go. Luckily, you can blow on your Magic Flute and get that shit off. So I guess it's better than tracking, but holy shit, what a complete waste of time. Alright boys, that is going to do it here. Thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate it, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you disagree, and I know a lot of you do because I talked a lot of shit about fighter mages and how shitty they are as a multi-class as opposed to a duel. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on the fighter HLAs. Disagree with me all you want, dude. Let me know what an idiot I am in the comments. Is there a favorite HLA that you love to use that you think I should have touched a bit more on? Have you found a way to use Globe of Blades or tracking to actually make them viable? Let me know in the comments, dude. Until next time, take it easy. Much love and God bless, my friends, and thanks for watching, dudes.